breakfast this morning, we've got some yogurt, a little bit of granola, and a banana. And then I spread some maple syrup over the whole thing. I'm hitting the ashwagandha, iron, and allergy pill again, and a cup of some pour-over coffee. I'm headed out mountain biking this morning. So I'm out here at Montaña de Oro State Park. This morning I'm going to go ahead and ride up Hazards Peak and drop off the backside over to East Boundary. I've done this ride up to Hazards Peak a bunch of times, but I've only done the East Boundary connector one time and it was pretty rowdy. The weather today is looking great. It's foggy and I was expecting it to be really hot this weekend, so I'm pretty excited to get out in the cool weather and just go enjoy the bike ride. It's Saturday today, so I've got the whole day just to go out, play, and have fun. So, see you up there.
Yeah! Oh my God, that was so much fun.
Today's ride was awesome. Did just under 12 and a half miles, total ride time, 1 hour, 44 minutes, and just under 2,000 feet of ascent. Super fun ride, great day. Couldn't ask for better weather, and I was feeling really good on the bike, on the uphill and the downhill. I feel like I was flying. I'm gonna get the bike cleaned up, have some lunch, and hang for the rest of the day. Quick and easy lunch today. I'm having some leftover chicken noodle soup from last night. This stuff is so good. You know, I put some bouillon in there and I thought it would make it super salty, but honestly, I want it to be way saltier than it actually is. So I've been putting flaky salt on it and it tastes so good. The noodles, after I left it overnight, soaked up all of the broth. So it's not exactly soup. It's sort of like a fancy pasta salad, you know, inspired by chicken noodle soup, but still delicious. The bike is clean, I'm clean. I am gonna go oil the chain while I have this little Tillamook ice cream sandwich snack. Okay, I want to talk about goals for a second. For the last 4 or 5 years, my main focus really has been on like endurance activities. So for me, what that means mainly is running and mountaineering by extension, and doing backcountry skiing. Before I really got into any of those activities, I had a hard time, motivating to go out and exercise. Aside from going to the gym, I've always been pretty consistent in lifting weights and trying to get stronger. A couple of years ago, my dad and I decided to go up to Mount Shasta, and we did a route on the east side of the mountain. That was pretty simple, no snow, just a scree slog to the top. And in preparation to that, I thought it would be kind of interesting to get a training program. The training program was geared mainly around running as your primary way of getting fit for mountaineering. Over the 12 weeks of that program, I probably ran at most 30 miles in a week. My longest run was maybe 13 miles. But through that training program, I realized that running is something that I really like to do. I stayed pretty consistent with it, but never really had a goal. It was mostly just running to stay fit. And at the time, I was getting more and more into rock climbing, and that was something that I was doing as my primary activity. A couple of months after going to Mount Shasta, a friend of mine called me and asked if I would want to go to the Faroe Islands and run a 60K. I said yes, and after the previous success with the training program that I had tried out, just decided to buy another training program and give it a shot. But this one was specifically geared towards mountain running, and I followed that program to a T. I hit every single run. I went out and crushed my workouts. I showed up, and what resulted from that was showing up to the ultra feeling ready, and I had a fantastic experience doing it. It ended up being around 38 miles, and I think it was something close to 10,000 feet of elevation gain over the entire course. And finishing, I was definitely worked, but I realized that that was something that I was capable of doing, and something that really opened up a lot of different avenues for me to explore. A couple of months after that, I was out rock climbing up in Bishop and met up with a group of people who were from San Luis Obispo. They just happened to be up there at the same time that I was, and we ended up forming this group of people who all knew each other, but never planned on being in the same place at the same time. Our group was probably 20 people, and we camped together, we climbed together during the day. And one night, as we were sitting around a campfire, I was talking about, goals. And coming off of the last ultra that I had done, I was fit and I was psyched, and I threw out the idea of doing the rim to rim to rim through the Grand Canyon. A bunch of people threw their names out there. They said, "That sounds awesome. I want to go do that. I'm in." And two of those guys, one guy named Jet and one guy named Nick, seemed really, really serious about it. So when we got home from that trip, we started a group chat and we started talking and we made a plan, and everyone, again, showed up for training, worked hard, and we went out and we did it. Shortly after coming home from the Grand Canyon, I was showering after a run and I found a lump on myself, and like any 24-year-old would do, I thought that's probably not a big deal. I am probably just overreacting, but if it's still there in a week, I'll go to the doctor and get it checked out. And so I went to sort of like an urgent care situation, and the person that I saw there seemed very concerned. Using the concern from that urgent care visit, I called my doctor and levied that information for a quicker visit, and went in and immediately was ordered a bunch of tests. I had ultrasounds, I got blood work done, and eventually I saw a doctor who looked at the scans and decided, we're getting you in for surgery right away. That appointment that I had with the doctor was the first week of August, and I went in for surgery on August 14th. The tumor that they removed did end up being cancerous. They sent it off for testing and wanted to verify exactly what it was, and on top of that as well, see if there was any future care that needed to be scheduled. At that point in time, I thought I was free and clear. The doctors that I was working with gave me that impression that everything was going to be okay, and my blood work and the scans that I had done sort of indicated that as well. When the test results came back, what they noticed is there was some spreading from the tumor, and
ultimately it was classified as stage 3A testicular cancer, which, essentially means that it had started to spread but hadn't made its way to other organs within the body. At the time, I was still recovering from the surgery when I got that news. The way they do that surgery essentially cuts through your abdominal wall, and so when you're recovering, it's similar to something like a hernia surgery. Your abs are really weak, lifting your legs is really hard, and so I was stuck on the couch with nothing to do and unable to really move my body. After about a month of taking things slow, I was able to, walk and move pretty regularly, but running still felt like a lot. And after about 2 months, I was able to start running again and starting to get back to some regular levels of activity. But at that point, because of the results of the tests that my tumor was sent off to go through, my doctor decided that it would be best that I do some chemotherapy. So in October of that same year, I started my first round of chemo, the first of 4 going out into the new year. That was a particularly hard time for me, not only because I was coming off of being the fittest I ever was and then was suddenly on the couch, unable to move, but also because this group that I had formed, who all had similar aspirations and we were starting to make goals together, they were continuing to do that. And they were continuing to make goals and continuing to make plans and get fitter and get faster and run longer, and I wanted to be a part of it. I did my best to run during chemo. At best, I probably ran 10 miles one week, and I'm really, really proud of that. I did my last round of chemo in the second week of January in 2024. Finishing that round of chemo really felt like the chains were coming off. I started to feel better, I started to sleep better, and I started to train really quickly right again. I wanted a goal, and I wanted to feel like I could get back to normal. So pretty much right away, me and some friends decided that we were going to do another ultra. We had planned to run the Ray Lakes Loop in Kings Canyon, and I was psyched. I was ready to go. And coming up to the date that we were supposed to do the run, I was feeling really fit, but also really nervous. Because of a fire that was happening in Kings Canyon, we ultimately had to change plans, and we ended up doing a run from Tuolumne down to Hetch Hetchy instead, which was a little bit shorter than we had originally planned on, but ultimately was just as beautiful and such an amazing experience and a really emotional experience for me. Just getting back to something that, as a kid I never thought I would be able to do, and to have this experience of learning what you're capable of, and then to feel like that's being taken away from you. So getting back and being able to do that again was just a really incredible experience. Fast forward to January of this year. I was in Utah, I was skiing at Brighton Resort, and on the first run of the day, I was going too fast, I got cut off, and because of the maneuvers that I made, I went off a lip and straight into the base of a tree. I was probably going about 40 miles an hour. I flew off a lip and I hit the tree backwards. When I hit the tree, I ricocheted and went further down the slope, but ultimately was caught by one of my skis that didn't come off in the accident. That was my left ski, the same, leg that received the injury, and the tail of the ski got stuck in the snow and kept me from going further down the hill. A result of the ski getting stuck in the snow was also that my leg got pulled out of my shattered hip socket. In that same moment, I bruised a lung, I almost entirely tore my ACL, and shattered my acetabulum, which is the hip socket. I was really lucky to be with some amazing skiers that day who had my back and were there with me in less than a minute of me hitting the tree. They unclipped me from my ski, they got me sideways on the hill, making sure that my head was stable, checked in with me, made sure I knew who I was, knew where I was, made sure I didn't hit my head, and they had ski patrol on me within minutes. I remember as soon as I stopped moving, the first thing that I did was make sure that I could feel my fingers and my toes. In that moment, I wasn't sure what had happened to me or what was going on, but the relief of knowing that I could still feel the lower part of my body was something that I will never really be able to explain to people. But in that moment, I knew things were going to be okay. They took me down the hill in a sled, they loaded me into an ambulance, and they brought me to a hospital in Salt Lake City. And after getting put under to do some initial scans, they woke me up to tell me what the damage was. In their assessment, the only thing that really stood out to me was them talking about some fractures that had happened to my spine. And the doctor said that I'd fractured my L1 through L5 vertebrae. In the moment, this was a really terrifying thing to hear, but after some further clarification, I learned that what had fractured was something that was rather inconsequential. On your vertebrae, there are these small little wings that stick off either side, and essentially what I had done is smashed all of them off between my L1 through L5, but there was no actual damage to the column itself. I think a lot about how lucky I am to not have been maybe an inch further up the hill when the accident happened, because it could have changed the entire course of my life. My new wife, who I just married the September previously, and my mom came out to Salt Lake City to rescue me and bring me home. I was in that hospital for 2 days before I had my surgery, and then I was discharged the day after. They brought me home, and I was on crutches for 2.5 months, but what I don't talk a lot about was that I also just spent 2.5 months on the couch doing nothing. This injury was particularly disheartening for me. Not just because I wasn't able to move or able to enjoy my ski season, but because I had really just come back from being injured or being sick, not 1 year before it actually happened. It was really hard to wrap my mind around the fact that I had just come back from something so traumatic, like having surgery for cancer and going through chemotherapy, and then to immediately be back to square one with my body. A lot of the fortitude that I have mentally comes from being able to use fitness and exercise as an outlet, and to have that stripped away from me once again was really intense. Going through the cancer experience, I sort of had an idea of what the end result would look like. The doctors were really clear that going through chemotherapy was mostly just a precaution, and I had already fully recovered from the surgery, and so I wasn't concerned about being able to use my body to the full extent. But going into the surgery, the doctor who did the hip reconstruction told me there's a good chance that I won't be able to move my foot at the ankle again, and that I aged my hip about 20 years in that accident. Hearing that, just recently having turned 26, felt very, very serious. Especially as someone who gets their pleasure from being outdoors and doing these activities that are super high impact and somewhat dangerous. That was a really scary thing for me to hear. The words that doctor told me really stayed with me throughout the entire recovery process. I didn't put any weight on my leg until about 3 months in, when I accidentally tripped on my stairs and had to set my foot down. And the feeling that shot through my leg in that moment really cauterized the fear that I felt that I was not going to get back to normal after everything was said and done. To go from that day of feeling so afraid that I'll never be able to walk normal again, to where I am now, to where this last week I actually did have a 10-mile week of running that felt great and I felt fit, is unreal. Is the only way that I can describe it. Over the span of 2 years, having 2 major life experiences that take me out of the thing that I derive the most joy from has been incredibly difficult and also incredibly rewarding. And what I will say is having the experience with cancer of, being down and having to come back after a long time off and having some sort of traumatic surgery or traumatic experience for my body was a great learning experience, and something that I have been trying to apply this second time around. Everything is still pretty fresh in my memory. I'm really grateful for the bike at this point. The second my doctor said that I could start exercising, they told me that being on a bike was one of the best ways that I could rehab my hip. And so I went out and I bought a road bike and immediately set a goal. And that goal was to do a century, a 100-mile ride. That particular goal, I think, really got me through some hard times. Being able to go out and spend time just alone with my thoughts, trying hard and being able to push in a way that felt normal and not like I was going to hurt myself was really empowering, and I'm really grateful for that. I'm also really grateful for the fact that a lot of my fitness has carried through onto the bike and now subsequently from the bike back to running. So here I am, post-injury, probably talking about it a little bit too soon, but wanting to think about goals. When I think about things I really want to do, there's 2 that come to mind immediately. The first is I want to run another ultra. I don't think I'm particularly fond of sanctioned races. I more so like the idea of going out and having an adventure with friends. So that being said, The route that I want to do is inspired by a local race that we have here out in the state park where I was mountain biking this morning, the MDO 50K. Signups are completely filled up at this point for that race, but I think around the same time of year, which is going to be end of March, I want to go out there and I want to run the course. That goal ties into goal number 2, which is going to be more on the adventure side, and that is to do the Castle Ball Ridge route on Mount Shasta. This is a route that me and some friends have been looking at for a couple of years now. It is a little bit more technical than Avalanche Gulch, definitely more of an adventure, and definitely something that I need to be fit for. Thinking about getting back to these kind of adventures has really gotten me through some hard times. And the fact that at this point I'm now actually able to say that I can train for both of those things is really incredible, seeing how it's almost barely been 7 months since I got hurt. With those 2 goals in mind, I'm going to train hard, I'm going to train smart, and I'm going to be safe, because I don't want this to happen again.